Welcome. This is a presentation on the wide and varied field of human nutrition in an overview fashion covering what nutrition is and why it's important. This presentation may be useful for those interested in nutrition and possibly for new undergrads studying it. And of course, for those who hold some regional prejudices, I will try my best to subdue my pronunciation nuances common in Essex accents that seem to continuously manifest itself subconsciously every time I speak in what I can only describe as a product of social and linguistic conditioning which I do currently resent. Should the words geezer, mate, or the shortening of any elongated vowels occur, such as Tuesday instead of Tuesday, bin instead of bean, I do sincerely and emphatically apologise in advance for any suffering this may have caused you. Nonetheless, I do hope prejudices are left out of your opinion of the presentation and that the content speaks for itself and that you find the presentation to be informative and somewhat enlightening. So, without further delay, let's do it. What is nutrition? Well, this is a big question because a lot of people have a very vague and superficial conception of what nutrition actually is. Most people conceptualise nutrition with a tip of the iceberg view and for the most part have no idea how complex this area of study is. Example, every time I'm in the taxi on the way to the train station, every taxi driver says something like, "Hello mate, how's it going? You alright? What are you up to today then?" To which I reply, "I'm in uni today." To which he says, "Oh yeah, what are you studying then?" To which I say, "I'm studying human nutrition." Now, he pauses for what must be at least 5 seconds. I can always imagine the workings of their minds scanning for the words human nutrition so they can elaborate on the conversation some more. After awkwardly pausing, he then replies with, "Oh, so what, you want to be a personal trainer then?" No, I'm studying nutrition, which means I'm going to be a nutritionist. I don't even think you can go to uni to become a personal trainer. In fact, I think you can be a personal trainer in a matter of months. My course is 4 years long, so no, I'm going to be a nutritionist. The funny thing is, after I say this, he often looks more puzzled. Anyway, I'm sure many people share his unknowing, which is why I'm going to try to inform you on the essentiality of nutrition and break it down hopefully in a simple and digestible way. First, to get a better understanding of what something is, we must first define it. So, let's work on a definition. My personal definition is nutrition, essential nutrients required by an organism to sustain life and promote health. It is essentially the functional components in food that an organism must obtain from diet in order for an organism to grow and flourish. Second question would therefore be, what are nutrients? Well, another personal definition, nutrients are organic or inorganic substances found in animal and plant material deemed biologically functional to an organism's physiological demands. So nutrients basically provide the necessary purpose that supports the functioning of an organism, plain and simple. Here we have a hierarchy of what essential nutrients are. So there's two distinctions between macronutrients and micronutrients. On the left we have macronutrients, on the right we have micronutrients. Macronutrients on the left, macro typically means it's a term used to describe large or taken in on a large scale. So when we consume macronutrients we consume 10, 50, 100 grams at a time. Whereas micronutrients tend to be taken in much smaller amounts, typically milligrams and micrograms. In the branch of micronutrients, we have two distinctions between minerals and vitamins, and then further subcategory between macrominerals and microminerals. Now, macrominerals, as the word macro implies, just means that they're taken in on a large scale. So typically, macrominerals are taken in anything up to 3 or 4 grams, whereas microminerals are taken in milligrams and micrograms and are otherwise referred to as trace elements and ultra trace elements. Now let's discuss types of essential nutrients. If we take a closer look at the distinctions between nutrients, we can see some familiar words. These are commonly referred to as the big three: carbohydrates, fats and proteins. The big three are typically needed for energy and growth. Carbs are found in bread, pasta, rice and cereal. Fats are found in nuts, oily fish, oils and fatty meats, while protein is commonly found in meats, fish, eggs, dairy and soy. These are the main and typical sources. Moving on to micronutrients, starting with vitamins. There are 13 essential vitamins in total, and there are two types of vitamins, fat-soluble and water-soluble. Vitamins A, D, E and K are the fat-soluble vitamins. Fat-soluble vitamins are absorbed better when consumed with dietary fat. It's no surprise, therefore, that most dietary sources of fat contain fat-soluble vitamins. Preformed vitamin A retinol, vitamin D3, and vitamin E are present in some fatty foods such as nuts, oily fish, egg yolk, and liver. Although vitamin K is typically found in Brussels sprouts and green leafy veg such as kale, whilst provitamin A beta-carotene is found in plant sources such as carrots, peppers, mangoes, and apricots. Water-soluble vitamins B1 thiamine, B2 riboflavin, B3 niacin, B5 pantothenic acid, B6 pyridoxine, B7 biotin, B9 folate, and B12 cyanocobalamin. And of course, vitamin C are the water-soluble vitamins. These are commonly found in whole grains, fruit, vegetables, eggs, dairy, and some types of meat and fish. Now, fat-soluble vitamins, unlike water-soluble vitamins, build up in the liver and fat cells until they become toxic. Vitamin A is probably the most notoriously noted for toxicity. It's an established fact that there's enough vitamin A retinol in a polar bear's liver to kill a man with one bite. Many reports circulate about fatal cases of vitamin A toxicity, including 2 explorers that were found dead after reportedly eating the liver of their sled dogs. Another story is of a UK health advocate called Basil Brown, who apparently consumed 10 gallons of carrot juice in 10 days, in which he died shortly after from liver failure from excessive vitamin A consumption. Water-soluble vitamins, however, can be taken without fat and are absorbed with water. Most are not stored, and there have been no serious issues with toxicity, except from side effects relating to B3 and B6 at high doses. High doses of vitamin C were taken daily by Linus Pauling, a biochemist and Nobel Prize holder who actually believed vitamin C cured the common cold. And although he may have been onto something, research shows at best high doses of vitamin C reduces the severity of cold symptoms but does not cure it. But Linus Pauling took up to 10 grams of vitamin C a day with no ill effect, although diarrhea has been observed at high doses. Ironically, he got cancer. But he did live to the age of 92 and attributed the postponing of his death to cancer to the vitamin C he took. Anywho, water-soluble vitamins are, for the most part, not stored. B12 is the only exception that can be stored in the liver for many, many years. Water-soluble vitamins are mainly found in fruit, veg, whole grains, but you do get vitamins in meat and dairy. Minerals are inorganic, naturally occurring substances that reside in the Earth's crust. They are typically uptaken by plants that we eat or that animals eat, in which we obtain the minerals from eating them. They can be harmful when taken in amounts more than required and do not have a therapeutic effect like some vitamins do. Minerals are commonly found in vegetables, meat, shellfish, some whole grains, and nuts. As a dietary side note, wild-caught Alaskan salmon has 4 times the amount of vitamin D in it than farm salmon. That's 1,000 IU of vitamin D in wild-caught salmon versus 250 IU of vitamin D in farmed salmon. Something to consider when deciding whether to eat a caged salmon or a free-range one. Also important to note, beware of foods rich in vitamin K, which are known to interfere with the effects of blood thinning medication. Vitamin K is responsible for clotting factors in blood and helps the blood coagulate, for example, at an injury site. A Scottish man who was on blood thinning medication was hospitalised with heart failure after consuming large amounts of Brussels sprouts over Christmas. This outlines the significant but largely unknown effect nutrition can have on the body from public perspective. After this, doctors also claim that Brussels sprouts should come with a health warning, which to me signifies their ignorance of nutrition and potentially of the drugs they prescribe. Now, before we finish up here, I'd like to add macronutrients contain calories. Macronutrients, i.e. carbohydrates, fats and proteins, contain 4 calories per gram, 9 calories per gram, and 4 calories per gram again. Alcohol also contains 7 calories per gram, while micronutrients do not actually contain any calories. They only assist in the metabolism of food. So, why is it important? Why is nutrition important? Is it important at all? Well, of course it is. As we discussed earlier, nutrition is absolutely essential for life, growth and health, but many other things are considered much more important by many other people. For example, here in the UK, most people can name more characters from EastEnders than they can nutrients essential for their very own life. It's just the way our society has been conditioned. It's not taught in school, and you're not taught it at home by your parents. Unless, of course, I'm your dad, which in that case you'll be taught it every day, extensively, probably from the age of 3. There are 6 main types of nutrients: carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water. Water I haven't listed here. It's actually first of importance, but I'm only going to discuss the typical nutritive substances found in food. Here you can see some basic functions of nutrients, and of course this list is not by any means exhaustive. I mean, you could literally write a dissertation on the functions of any single vitamin or mineral or nutrient. You know, the functions are vast. This is literally just a very, very simple idea. Starting with carbohydrates, carbohydrates are composed of large chains of individual sugar units called monosaccharides. These monosaccharides bond together to form disaccharides, polysaccharides, and oligosaccharides. The term carbohydrate is literally used to describe all of these molecules. The distinction between simple and complex sugars is based on how big the molecule of sugar actually is. In other words, the smaller monosaccharides and disaccharides, which are just single and double units of sugar, are the simple sugars, while the longer, more complicated chains of polysaccharides and oligosaccharides are the complex sugars. When any carbohydrates are consumed, they undergo breakdown via salivary and pancreatic enzymes in the process of digestion to singular units of sugar so they can be absorbed into the bloodstream to reach cells in which they are subsequently subjected to glycolysis, in which the glucose is split apart to provide high energy compounds called ATP. ATP is used for almost every energy costing physiological process in the body, so this is why it's important. This is what we mean when we say our bodies need glucose for energy. We're actually using it as a substrate for energy. We're actually using it as a substrate for ATP synthesis, which we need to sustain our complex energy demands. And as a dietary side note, I have to mention this. I'd like to add that people often confuse the statement that our bodies and brains need glucose on a literal basis. Okay, you don't need to consume Lucozade Sport for your daily energy needs. Your body will get glucose from pretty much every carbohydrate you consume. Okay, you will even break down the protein that you consume and convert that into glucose if you needed it through a process called gluconeogenesis. So for the purpose of your bodies and for the purpose of your health, consuming glucose directly from the consumption of fizzy drinks or jelly sweets or anything like that will actually cause more harm than good and may actually increase your chance of becoming overweight or developing diabetes. So, moving on to fats. Fats are also composed of chains, but the singular components are called fatty acids, and these are bonded together to form monounsaturated fatty acids, polyunsaturated fatty acids, and saturated fatty acids. A degree of bodily fat actually acts as an internal cushioning and protection for the vital organs. It's actually really important, and it makes up vital components of our cell walls, and also it forms hormones and cholesterol. The key here is balance. Moving on to protein, most of the body is comprised of protein, okay? Your whole body is basically integrated with protein. And protein is comprised of many building blocks called amino acids. Amino acids also form chains called peptides, which also form larger molecules, di, tri, and polypeptides. But dietary protein, which is broken down into its basic amino acid constituents when consumed, is typically used for growth and repair, but also makes up very important components in the body, such as tissues, enzymes, and antibodies. Moving on to vitamins. Vitamins are a group of organic substances largely manufactured by plants and bacteria that are needed for normal cell function, growth, and development. Now, vitamins act as coenzymes, which mean they basically assist in the metabolism of other nutrients like fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, basically to help us, get the energy from the actual food. Basically, vitamins help us get energy from food, and they assist in the breakdown of our food. Moving on to minerals. Minerals also act as cofactors. They assist in enzyme activity. They also act as prosthetic groups, but we'll skip the biochemistry lesson for more reason other than because I'm rubbish at it. But minerals also act as structural components, making up the building blocks of many tissues and cell components also. Now, the importance of micronutrients can't really be overstated. A lot of people are very focused on the big three, the calorie-containing nutrients, because of the calories in versus calories out notion, leading them to think the calorie-containing nutrients are the be-all and end-all because X fitness website or X fitness model says so. But, of course, by doing so, you're compromising the respect and acknowledgement for what makes us flourish. Magnesium, for example, a mineral, is responsible for over 300 enzymatic processes. Without it, then 300 enzymatic processes would cease to exist. Iron is also incorporated into hemoglobin to assist with the oxygen carrying function of red blood cells. Vitamin C is essential for collagen production, which is the most abundant protein incorporated into tissues such as ligaments, tendons, blood vessels, skin, bones, teeth, eyes, gums, even the heart, among many, many more. Bleeding gums and loss of teeth can also be shown in those with scurvy due to a vitamin C deficiency. And without vitamin C in the diet, all of the tissues it's incorporated into through the production of collagen will literally fall apart. Okay, your immune system breaks down and subsequently death proceeds. So, it's important to think about my first definition of nutrition. And this is the way I like to look at it, okay? Carbs, fats, and proteins support life, but it's the micronutrients that promote health. Okay, you can survive on carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, but you can't flourish and thrive without micronutrients. A very important point to think about. Now, the importance of nutrition obviously is evident when you see people who are malnourished. It's evident when you see deficiency disease. It's evident when you see people who are starving and also people who die from starvation. Now, poor nutrition in the first 1,000 days of a child's life can also lead to stunted growth, which is actually irreversible, and is also associated with impaired cognitive ability and reduced schoolwork and performance. Okay, now, when given an extreme example of why nutrition is important, the visual impact makes it a lot clearer. There are still many serious, chronically destructive, and fatal nutrition deficiencies in the world, but the big three are seen in iron, vitamin A, and iodine. Now, iron deficiency is the most common and widespread nutritional disorder in the world, and a staggering 2 billion people are anemic. That's over 30% of the world's entire population that suffer from an iron deficiency. And vitamin A deficiency affects 280 million children under the age of 5, predominantly in sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and parts of Latin America. Such prolonged vitamin A deficiencies, as seen in these countries, leads to blindness, cataracts, and affects the immune system. Iodine deficiency, iodine, is the most prevalent yet easily preventable cause of brain damage in the world. Okay, yet it still occurs in parts of Africa and Asia. Severe deficiencies cause goitre, I believe it's pronounced goitre. It's essentially a deformedly enlarged thyroid gland that swells up in the neck in the hope of trying to get more iodine from the bloodstream. The thyroid gland literally swells and swells to a real sort of grotesque size, almost like a frog that sort of ribbits. It's that kind of thing in your throat. It is really quite scary, and it's because the thyroid gland is desperately trying to sort of draw upon reserves from the bloodstream of iodine, which is it's not actually going to get it. This can be downsized when iodine therapy is introduced, but there is still a large size of your thyroid that's irreversible because of this. So it's both amazing and scary to think of the impact on one's health just one micronutrient can have that's needed in amounts of sort of 1,000th of a gram. Here we can see a child suffering with rickets. Now, this is a deficiency disease of vitamin D. This is what happens when you don't get enough vitamin D in your diet, and it's a severe deficiency. This is vitamin D is responsible for bone formation, and when you don't get enough, obviously your bones grow in a very deformed manner. And of course, this is the result of a starved child, which unfortunately is extremely prevalent across the world. However, even developed countries, the UK, the US, Europe, that are considered fed countries where food availability is high, there are still nutritional deficiencies in the UK that affect health, albeit in most cases in a much less dramatic way, but it still does exist in small subsets of the population. Factors responsible vary from genetic disorders to low income to low socioeconomic status. But Vitamin D deficiency in the UK is currently a growing public health concern. Less than 1% of young women from mixed ethnic backgrounds are consuming more than the current 10 microgram recommendations of vitamin D a day, and most women are only averaging a daily intake of 3 micrograms a day. Now, this is worrying considering the recommendations during pregnancy are 10 micrograms. The recommendations for subcutaneous vitamin D production from UVB exposure, that's essentially vitamin D production from sunlight exposure in Britain, is also being called into question for being an unreliable source. So don't just rely on your sunlight exposure. It's very poor in winter, autumn months. We don't get a great deal of exposure in them months, and we really only get it in the summer, and stores don't typically last. So you have to look for your food sources, which would obviously be salmon is a great source. So the problem of micronutrient deficiency seems to be a combination of food availability for some and food awareness for others. Other less privileged countries, of course, suffer much more severe deficiency states, but we do still suffer with suboptimal levels in this country. Then, of course, you have the other end of the spectrum. Now, obviously, you can have overnutrition. So if you consume too many carbohydrates, too many calories, too much fat, you're going to get obesity, you're going to become overweight. If you consume too much of the wrong types of carbohydrates, lots of refined carbohydrates, lots of sugars, you're going to get diabetes, or you're going to at least become, your insulin will become resistant. It won't work properly. The effects of insulin are going to become reduced, and your body's not going to be able to regulate your sugar levels, and you can start to develop diabetes. Cardiovascular disease is caused typically from high saturated fat intakes and a poor diet in general. Hypertension, which is high blood pressure, that's from an increased salt intake, too much salt in the diet, too much salt in your foods. Cancer, cancer is linked to saturated fat consumption and junk food and processed food. That the two are linked, so that's a factor for it as well. Fatty liver disease, too much of a bad diet, too much fructose can also cause fatty liver disease. People who receive too much nutrition, of course, in developed countries, are actually vulnerable to overnutrition. China, for example, now has nearly 3,000 KFCs, with one new KFC opening up in mainland China almost every frigging day. McDonald's already has 1,300 locations in China, wow, and has planned to open up one new restaurant every day for another 2 years. I'm very pleased to mention actually that McDonald's annual profits took a plummet last year. I'm throwing my hands up in the air for that one. They took a big plummet, and less people are eating it now. And I want everyone to heed to this advice. Okay, it is poison, just at all costs. Not even because it's bad food essentially, or it's junk food or whatever. I mean, just in terms of to have some sort of moral integrity when it comes to your food. Have some respect for yourself and have some respect for the food that you eat, because McDonald's do not have respect for you, and they do not have respect for the food. They're typically all they're interested in is their profits, and they will compromise the quality of their food purely to increase their profits at the cost of your health. Anyway, we're going completely off topic. Moving back on topic now. So as you can see, the effects of overnutrition are evident when you walk outside and you see people who are overweight. It's actually ironic because around the world there are dying and starving children and adults, malnourished and underfed. But there's the flip side, where obviously you also have potentially dying, albeit self-inflicted people at a much slower rate, who are overfed and overnourished. But even these overfed individuals can suffer deficiencies because they actually overfeed on high quantity and low quality processed junk that's rich in calories, fats, protein and carbs, but completely void of antioxidants, vitamins, minerals and fiber. So a new problem arises where you can be overweight but undernourished. And obesity has doubled since the 1980s, and in 2006 the amount of overweight people overtook the amount of underweight people in the world. Obesity itself is obviously a huge factor for a whole host of diseases, and the impact of obesity-related diseases and type 2 diabetes are attributed to an increased intake of fats, oils and sugar across the world. Child obesity rates, however, have stabilised recently, but there's still a clear dysfunction in our current food choices. Statistics from DEFRA 2010 shows on average people waste 24% of vegetables and 20% of fruit purchased. This is also compounded with the fact that the percentage of UK household purchases of fruit and veg are 10% lower than the Eat Well recommendations of 33%, while the Eat Well recommendations of food and drinks high in fat and sugar is 8%, and the actual amount purchased is 24%. So you can clearly see there that we have a huge discrepancy and a huge gap between what we're recommended to consume for health and disease prevention and what we're actually consuming, which of course is directly contributing to the rise of health issues that we now see. So this pretty much brings me to the end of the presentation. I have some references here, and I also have a few other references that I haven't listed because I didn't want to squeeze them on the page. But if you are interested in anything that I've mentioned and want references for anything that isn't already stated here, please leave a comment below. I will grab the reference for you. It's not a problem. So concluding thoughts, really all I want to say is that nutrition is definitely something that needs more attention, more understanding, and more respect by the general public. It's important to have some detail as well as respect and appreciation in our conception for nutrition. We need it. It tastes good, and the quality of what we should consume should always be the main focus over quantity. All I would say is just try to look at your diets in a different perspective. And also, when you think of the word nutrition, don't just think of potatoes, don't think of bread, don't think of pasta, don't think of chips, don't think of sausages and bacon and stuff like that. When you think of the word nutrition, think of all of the essential nutrients. Think of the vast and complex diversity in essential nutrients that are all so crucial for every single physiological process in your body that you cannot live without. Nutrition is a collective term to describe everything that your body needs to thrive, to flourish, to sort of grow and really perform at its optimal. Okay, it's very easy to be misled into thinking that the micronutrients are not important because there's no calories in them, right? I mean, we're going on a diet, we're going to reduce our carbs. Who cares about vitamins and minerals? They're not going to help me lose weight. But you've got to understand, the way the body works is like a machine, and all the cells, they operate on a very automatic kind of mechanic way, and they are all dictated by vitamins, minerals, and nutrients you consume. You must focus on your diet as a whole and do not only focus and obsess about the calorie containing nutrients, because ultimately you're going to compromise your own health and you're going to cap your own potential when it comes to what you can get out of your body. And if you want your body to perform at its best and you want to be healthy and you want to lose fat or you want to build muscle, then you have to look at the diet as a whole. That pretty much leaves it as a closed case. I will silently disappear. So if anyone wants any more information, I'd advise you to go to my website, www.nutritionnerd.co.uk. Also have a Facebook page, Nutrition Nerd, and I'm also on Instagram as Nutrition Nerd. So if you want to have any more information and be enlightened further, I suggest you take a look there. Other than that, I'm going to leave you with this concluding statement, and I'm going to say bye-bye.